May I acknowledge the traditional owners on whose land we meet and pay my respects to their elders and their ancestors. New South Wales Farm Writers Association President Paul Dello, Secretary Bev Jordan, is she here? I haven't seen Bev yet. Senator-elect David Lyneham, distinguished guests, members. Thank you very much for your kind invitation to address you today. There can be few greater compliments than to ask somebody for their opinion. And it'll be my endeavour today to reciprocate that in kind, in responding with respect and due consideration. You've asked me to reflect on my experiences of some 25 years in Canberra as a CEO across the industries you referred to, agriculture, food and grocery, and mining, and how public affairs advocacy has evolved over that period, what lessons I've gleaned that I would be prepared to share with you, and of course, related to both, what do I consider to be the essential ingredients of public policy. Now, I got to tell you straight up, it feels a bit strange, and this is only the second speech I've given since I left my former position with the Minerals Council Australia, and it's a bit strange to be speaking without their authority and intellectual resources. And it might raise expectations among some of you that I'll be somewhat unguarded, or less guarded in what I have to say. Will you be disappointed? If anything, I'm likely to be more tentative, for fear I join a debate for which I'm less ill-equipped, or make the presumption and give you the impression that I actually know what I'm talking about when I don't. And I can tell you I certainly have no intention of being a Malcolm Fraser, pontificating from the sidelines, because I've worked my way into RDS, relevance deprivation syndrome. So in tackling the task that you've asked me today, I'm going to be more in the generic than in the specific. And I'll let you work out where you think it applies to your circumstances, the cap where it might fit. I came to public policy in Canberra in April 1988, and that was smack in the middle of the Hawke-Keating era of government. It was smack in the middle of the Great Wheat Debate, the farmers' rally on Canberra in 1985, the Mudgeonbury Meatworks industrial dispute, reform of Australia's waterfront grain loading export terminals, and of course the Uruguay round of multilateral trade negotiations. It was a period of incredible change. It heralded the deregulation of the Australian economy, the institution of open market economic reforms, and it shifted Australia from the tripartite collective doctrine of government-run, union-controlled and industry-protected, far more to the dictates of an open and flexible economy in the market, centred on the aspiration of the individual, less so than the collective doctrine. And as the Asian and global financial crises attest, it gave us an economy better able to withstand external shocks. This period of change is instructive for today's generation of public policy advocates. There are three key drivers that I've pulled out for you that I think stand out. The first one is the changing external environment. The heady debates that had dominated the so-called post-Cold War era over market versus centrally planned economies, they were done and dusted. The intellectual debate was won. It was now more about the social politics of transition. Globalisation, the global interdependency of trade and commerce, it had evolved to the point where capital, product, services, markets, people, information, technology had almost become borderless, as it is today. And globalisation had become the catch cry for enduring structural change, driven by the consistent and persistent embrace of the market. in individual nations' construct of their institutional, their social and their economic public policies. Emerging economies in particular were starting to play the game of economic catch-up rapidly. Speed and determination in adopting the open market policies that had so transformed the West and in reforming their political, institutional and governance arrangements. Indeed, when I sat in Doha at the multilateral trade negotiations and witnessed China be admitted to the World Trade Organization, I could not possibly have envisaged what a massive change that was going to visit on the world. They came into in the world markets with a rush, and it basically precipitated one of the greatest industrial revolutions since the 19th and early parts of the 20th centuries. But with that transformation, so too did society's attitudes and expectations of governance and regulation. It shifted from that common denominator I was talking about to the aspirations of the individual and the dictates of the market. And concomitantly, society's expectations of business behaviour and accountability shifted more to the market than it did to the protector of government, the public protector. It's put incredible demands on business, their behaviour and their accountability, and in particular, the pursuit of sustainable development. And that placed uncompromising demands on our businesses for improved and in social and environmental stewardship of the communities and the people and the environmental assets that were under our care. Mining and agriculture got the message loud and clear. And remember, I started my career in agriculture when soil erosion and burn, bash and bury and monoculture cropping and, it was all part and parcel of the landscape. So agriculture had to change and mining had to change, and they certainly have. They had to change their modus operandi if they were going to earn and maintain a social licence to operate. There's no turning this tide of change. It's part of the structural, it's part of the furniture, even if there are cyclical variances about a longer-term trend. And in economic policies, we've seen some of that. We've got Europe's straitened circumstances. We've had the advent of the Howard era of middle-class welfare. We've seen the post-GFC period of Rudd and Gillard and Rudd governments, where reform inertia, even backsliding, and fiscal largesse were the hallmarks of a time of class warfare and politics of envy. The second driver is bipartisan political leadership. When Hawke government came to power, Australia was an inflexible, rigid economy, mired in regulatory control. Enterprise was stifled by bureaucracy, state-owned enterprises, a culture of dependency and entitlement, and antipathy towards business and economic development. Those of you in this room too young to recall that era, it's worth reflecting. Back then, government was essentially in control of all arms of macroeconomic policy. It's what some have referred to as macro policy activism. The exchange rate was fixed. Government conducted monetary policy. Financial markets were regulated. The labour market was centralised, regulated, collective and heavily union dominated. Terms and conditions of employment bore little relationship to productivity and profitability. And workplace culture was one of confrontation and conflict, spawned by the governing institution's foundation, raison d'etre, which was one of conciliation and arbitration. Governments owned banks, energy, water utilities, railways, ports, and even an airline. Industry was protected through tariffs and subsidies and profoundly regulated in the belief that governments knew better than markets. Agriculture too had some assistance in the form of tractor bounties and fertiliser subsidies, albeit immaterial in comparison to the non-rural sector's assistance, and bore a significant amount of the consumer tax equivalent of essentially propping inefficient industries at the expense of the efficient. But agriculture was also heavily dominated by regulated and statutory marketing authorities operating under acts that regulated the domestic markets and exports. And they pooled the product, the sales returns and the marketing risk across producers, almost irrespective of geography, product quality and market specifications. FAQ did not actually, formally it was referred to as fair average quality, but those of you with a little bit of a mindset can understand what the F stood for, and the rest of it was all quality. That was funny.